The expectation for the Dodgers is still to win the World Series, but is the expectations for how they get there changed? Let's get locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is a daily podcast covering the World Series champion Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans' perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube. All you got to do is search for Locked On Dodgers. You can become an everydayer by listening and watching every day, which can be made easier by subscribing and being notified when our episodes are ready or when we're going live on YouTube. If this is your first time listening watching, welcome. I'm Vince Samperio. That's Jeff Snyder, and we have been Dodger fans our entire lives. We've covered the Dodgers in our own way over the last 10 years. And we've been doing this podcast here since 2019, talking Dodgers. And over all those years, more specifically the last 10 years where we've been covering the team, Jeff, there's been expectations for the Dodgers. Most of those years, they've been World Series expectations and aspirations, and that hasn't changed for this year. But now that we're a month through the season, a month and a half when the Dodgers actually started the season, how they get to the World Series might be a little bit different. The aspirations of setting the record for most wins in a season might be gone, but I don't think much else has changed other than that, right?
Yeah, I don't know how realistically either of us were thinking 117 wins. I still wouldn't rule it out. The fact that they're on pace for 110 wins, even though everybody can see they've been underperforming, I just think that if you're the kind of team that can win 117 games, you're also the kind of team that is probably going to take your foot off the gas at different times during the season, and sometimes even in April. There's been a little bit of the days off they're giving to Will Smith with the goal of keeping him healthy for the whole season. That's very clearly a long-term view. There's going to be so many long-term view decisions that, this team's probably going to max out at 110, 112 wins, only 110, 112, even though I do expect them to play better. And so you would think on pace for 110, they play better. Maybe they do end up, challenging that 117, but there will be other, they'll take their foot off the gas in different ways with the goal of having everybody fresh and ready in October.
Yeah. And, with the day off here, we're taking some questions from our insiders. We're going to talk about a couple little roster moves the Dodgers made and what that means for the month of May. We're going to talk about what happens if this team ever does get healthy. But we're going to start right here with the expectations because we had a couple questions. Kevin from Monrovia kind of asked for our partial season expectation reset, knowing what we know now. Have expectations gone up, gone down, stayed the same? And then, a question from Matt, one of our insiders, saying the struggles in April have led them to lead the division by a game and a half. By the end of this month, will they be up by a little bit more than that because they have been playing better? And yeah, that's kind of, we know what we're working with here. We're working with a very privileged set of expectations where, okay, I don't think they're going to win 117 games, but I still think they could win 105 games, 110 games. And, it's a lot different than what some other teams are dealing with, especially after this first month, because yeah, we're talking about have expectations changed for a team that was expected to win the World Series, expected to win a lot of games. And we're sitting here May 1st, and the Dodgers are in first place and now tied for the best record in baseball or around there. I think the Mets lost today. So we know we're dealing with privileged expectations here.
Yeah, absolutely. I would be, I don't know if disappointed is the right word. I'd definitely be surprised if they don't win at least 105 games. I feel like that's kind of the baseline for this team. And that's why I'm not stressing looking at the standings. Yes, it's nice the Dodgers are in first place by themselves. I did have some feelings of I wish the Giants and Padres had split their 2-game series instead of the Padres sweeping it, to knock all them down. But also there's a big part of my brain that says, you know what, the Dodgers are going to win at least 105 games, probably close to 110. And the Giants and Padres aren't going to come anywhere near that. You know, they can play as well as they want, but they're not going to win that many games. And so I'm not stressed about the standings. And so even when like the short-term things, when Tyler Glasnow gets hurt, and yes, there's a little bit of that panic mode or whatever, but I'm like, it's April, you know, now it's May 1st. Not that I don't care that Tyler Glasnow is hurt, but this was all part of what we expected, you know, and that we didn't know the specifics or the timing or anything, but we expected Tyler Glasnow to not make 28 starts this year. We expected Blake Snell to probably not make 28 starts this year. We probably have the same expectations for Dustin May. And so when he inevitably gets hurt, you know, it's all those things. And then on the offensive side, like, yeah, I didn't expect Michael Conforto to hit into 847 ground balls in the first, or double plays in the first month of the season. But, you know, I didn't expect a perfect offense either. Dodgers kind of notoriously slow starters on offense sometimes. And so getting all of this together, my brain is all about, okay, well, let's just keep on plugging along, keep on playing well, and hope that everybody's healthy in October for all the right.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, yeah, I don't think I would have expected Landon Knack and Bobby Miller and Justin Robleski all to have started games for the Dodgers in this first month, mostly because of all the days off that we talked about leading into the season where, yeah, I didn't, you know, Glasnow, you probably think he's going to have to go on the IL at some point. Didn't think it'd be his first month of the season. Blake Snell, not that he's been a guy that gets hurt a lot, but, you know, sometimes the Dodgers might have just forced that issue at some point. Didn't think it'd be in the first month of the season. I honestly wouldn't have thought Clayton Kershaw would be throwing 65, 70 pitches at this point on May 1st. So, like, there's different good and bad expectations. But overall, from, like, the offensive side, you know, Max Muncy sitting on here on May 1st with one homer. Clearly, the expectations for him have changed. You know, Shohei Ohtani picked it up this last week. You know, he's not on pace for 50 homers like he was last year. I think he's closer to on pace for around 35, 40 homers right now, which would still be great. But there is a lot left to be desired on the offensive side. And that's coming off a 5-game winning streak where they've scored 51 runs. Like, it's tempered, but tempered for specific reasons.
Yeah. And then though, you look at the Dodgers' actual lineup, because I agree with you that I expect the offense to be better. But then you look at 7 of their 9 starters have OPS pluses of at least, like, the Mookie is the lowest of those 7 at 112. He's only 12% better than average, you know, and then it ranges from there all the way up to 194 at Freddie Freeman. But you got, you know, Tommy Edman at 128, and then everybody else is over 150. Andy Paz 152, Teoscar 163, Ohtani 168, Smith 164. Like, but even with those numbers, like, yeah, I do expect Shohei Ohtani to hit a little better than he has so far this year. I expect Will Smith, I expect a little bit of a drop. But Ohtani, Teoscar, Mookie for sure, I expect to hit better. Like, they're not crazily overperforming, and you can make a decent case that they're underperforming, especially when you get to those other two of Conforto and Muncy. That, yeah, I do expect those guys to both hit better than they have so far. And then, you know, the bench I don't have much hope for, but, you know, that's a different conversation. But yeah, I expect these Dodgers to be better than they have been so far because they've underperformed.
Yeah, getting away from individual stats, you look at the Dodgers, and, you know, we've talked about the walks, and they're, I think, tied for 7th or in 7th for walks by a team. They've been 2nd the last 4 years. You would imagine that's going to go up at some point. But you look at, okay, you know, why have they struggled? Where have they struggled? What's been the struggle? With runners in scoring position, they're first in OPS with the 908 OPS when they have at-bats with runners in scoring position. The bad part is that the number of at-bats with runners in scoring position is 19th in the league. They've only had 248 total at-bats with runners in scoring position. So if you
also weren't they 28th like a week ago?
Yeah, I think so. They're pretty down there. So
moving on up, baby.
Yeah. So if, you know, do I expect them to keep up 908 OPS the entire runners in scoring position? No, but even a little bit of a drop there, but a rise in number of at-bats to runners in scoring position, will probably lend itself to more runs being scored because it's not going to drop as much as it's going to rise.
Yeah. If you get 1 hit in 2 at bats with runners in scoring position, or you get 3 hits and 6 at bat, or 3 hits and 8 at bats, your batting average goes down, but your run scored goes up. And so, yeah, that as we see the bottom of the lineup, Andy Pages remembering how to hit has been huge. If you get to the point where on any given day you've got 7 legitimate hitters in your lineup, even when you account for somebody having a day off, if you get to that point, then yeah, your opportunities with runners in scoring position are just going to go up and up, and your chances of coming through in those situations will go up too.
Yeah. So overall, the expectations are still the Dodgers are going to win the World Series. How they get there hasn't changed because we still think they're going to win the NL West. We still think they're probably going to, if they win 105, 110 games like we're talking about, they're still going to be the number 1 seed in all of baseball. And yeah, in that regard, expectations haven't changed, but just the way they get there maybe is going to be a little bit different than what we thought. But also, the next 5 months could be like what we expected, and this first month wasn't. And then, we're right back where we started. So,
yeah.
All right. The Dodgers made a couple moves on their day off. Nothing that's going to, no groundbreaking changes, but definitely something that makes them a little bit more sustainable in the month of May. So we're talking about it. Make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. Today's episode is brought to you by Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K. Did you know your Fire TV is also on Xbox? Because you can turn any TV into your gaming and entertainment hub with a Fire TV Stick 4K device. No console required. Just grab your paired controller, subscribe, or sign in to Xbox Game Pass Ultimate with EA Play included, and you're ready to go. Dive into hundreds of premium titles, including EA Sports College Football 25 to Call of Duty, as easily as you stream your favorite shows. This one's like perfect for someone like me who doesn't play video games, but used to play a lot of sports video games, but doesn't want to pay for a console just to play sports video games. So boom, I grab an Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K, I grab a controller, I pair it with my TV, and now I'm playing sports video games like I used to without having to pay, multiple hundreds of dollars for a console. It's all that fun without the upfront investment that you make buying an entire console. So go right now and get a Fire TV Stick 4K. Obviously it goes beyond just games. It does everything else that the Fire Sticks you're used to using for streaming and all that type of stuff. So head to Amazon.com/Fire TV Locked On to get started. Xbox Game Ultimate subscription and compatible controller required. Available on select devices, including Fire TV Stick 4K 2nd Gen, Fire TV Stick 4K Max, 1st and 2nd Gen, and Fire TV Cube 3rd Gen. I want to thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day, or your last listen, or maybe somewhere in the middle today, as we're kind of in the middle of the day here. We appreciate those of you that are listening live right now. We appreciate those of you that are not listening live, but also listening. And, if you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you. If you're listening at home, we appreciate you. Whatever it is, if you're listening, we are fans of it. And you can always go beyond the podcast, come Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. You get text directly from us, keeping you up to date with the Dodgers, and an invite to our Discord server. And if you were a Locked On Dodgers Insider, you would have gotten a text with a couple moves that the Dodgers made on Thursday. They claimed JP Feyereisen off waivers from the Diamondbacks, and then they acquired Ryan Loutos from the St. Louis Cardinals for cash in order to make room on the 40-man roster. Michael Kopech and Blake Trinan go to the 60-day AL. No real notable thing there. We pretty much expected Blake Trinan to be shut down for a while. Michael Kopech is barely starting to throw bullpen, so he wouldn't have made it before 60 days anyways. So JP Feyereisen, if he sounds familiar, he pitched for the Dodgers last year. If the other guy doesn't sound familiar, it's because I don't think I've ever heard of him before today. But, Jeff, there's a specific reason these are the two moves right now, I would imagine. You're on mute.
Sorry about that, guys. Yeah, I was thinking about this just yesterday about how here's why I was thinking about it, because they're playing the Marlins. And I remember yesterday I was in my car listening to the game when Clayton McCullough came out to take Cal Quantrill out of the game. And I'm like, how does a team like the Marlins not run into the same issues as the Dodgers when their starters are getting pulled in the third and fourth inning every day. How is that not worse than throwing bullpen games once a week? And then I remembered, oh yeah, the Marlins are bad. They have a lot of young players, which means they have a lot of relief pitchers who have options. And so when a guy pitches, then you just send him back to the minors and replace him with somebody else. And they have a whole 40-man roster full of guys who have minor league options available. And that's something that the Dodgers this is one of the challenges of being a good team, of building a super bullpen, is you've got guys who don't have options. So, if you need to make room for somebody, you don't just have whoever you want. And we've even seen it in the past with the Dodgers. You have just these relievers who are interchangeable and, okay, send this guy down to the minors, call it this guy. Dodgers don't really have that this year. And maybe more than ever before, they don't have it this year because they did bring in a couple top end relievers this last offseason. So I feel like what this move does with Ryan Loutos and JP Feyereisen, both of those guys have minor league options, which means they can be they have Yoenders Gomez, who pitched again yesterday and was terrible. But he doesn't have minor league options. That's why they ended up with him, because he doesn't have minor league options. And so in order to get him off the roster, they have to DFA him. So he's probably getting DFA'd the next time they need to call somebody up. But you replace Yoenders Gomez on the 40-man roster with guys like this who, you can call him up for a day, kind of like the Noah Davis, except hopefully pitching better. You can call him up, send him back down, bring up another guy. And so when you need a warm body, when you are up 12-2 on the Marlins and you need a guy who is technically able to finish the game, even if he does allow 5 runs doing it, you have that guy, and then you can send him back down. So it's not even that the Dodgers are expecting Ryan Loutos or JP Feyereisen to be extremely good, but they are pitchers who have minor league options. I do think there's some hope for Loutos. I think there's some underlying stuff that I think they feel like they can do something with him. But I think the main thing is they have minor league options so they can be on that revolving door between LA and Oklahoma City.
Yeah, you're just expanding what it is. Like Matt Sauer and Noah Davis have been those guys a couple of times already. Honestly, if everyone was healthy, realistically, Kasperius and Dreyer might be those guys as well, just because they might have not gotten the opportunity that they've gotten to kind of prove, okay, we belong here. And maybe when guys are healthy, that's when they have to make some tougher decisions. Like if Trinan and Kopech and Phillips and everyone was healthy right out of the gate, and Tony Gonsolin was healthy, and they would have made a decision, with Destamay, like we might have not even seen Dreyer Kasperius to start the year, or we only would have seen one of them. So now, especially with 19 games in 20 days, with, probably a little bit of uncertainty there in terms of what they're going to do, whether it's a bullpen game or a spot starter. Yeah, you're going to need some expendable arms. And, Michael Kopech, while he did go on the 60-day IL, it's not going to be that much longer. He should be ready in maybe 3-4 weeks. And, you don't feel bad about, unfortunately, DFAing a guy like, JP Feyereisen or Yoenders Gomez or whoever it is. These are the types of arms that live in the 38 to 40 spots of your roster. The Dodgers have done it for a few years. It was the first year where they didn't really have those types of guys, and we weren't really sure what was going to happen. And, that's why at that one point we questioned, what would Anthony Bonda do to not be considered a rostered player for the Dodgers? But with all the injuries, he's bought himself a little bit of time. Not the way he's pitching, but just the way of the nature of the
Dodgers. And I've seen people being upset like that the Dodgers traded Ryan Brazier as they've had relievers get hurt. It's like, why did they trade Brazier? Because Brazier doesn't have options. They needed some of that flexibility. I think maybe what threw a little wrench into things, they didn't necessarily expect Kasperius and Dreyer to end up being 2 of their better relievers, because they are 2 of the 3 guys who actually do have minor league options. Their 3 guys with options are Kasperius, Dreyer, and Vesia. And those guys aren't guys you want to send to the minors. And so you got to have some of these guys, and so Gomez will kind of fill that role of a Brent Honeywell or a Nabil Krismat from last year, where, you don't have options. So we're just going to DFA you. Nobody's going to claim you because you're not very good. And then, you'll go back to AAA. And then the next time we DFA you, you'll have the option of becoming a free agent if you want to. Maybe he will, maybe he won't, but you got to have these guys with options. And so I hope that these guys actually make some contributions, but even just the warm body contribution will be welcome for this current iteration of the Dodgers.
Yeah, we got asked about Feyereisen specifically from an insider. Basically, how he didn't work out for the Dodgers. They signed him to a 2-year deal when he was coming off surgery. He didn't pitch very well for them last year, and kind of the role he's fitting in, and kind of like we said, I would imagine he's just a warm body that they're familiar with. Maybe they think that another year removed from surgery will help him out. But I guess to say I wouldn't grow attached to him. If they need a couple innings and a couple games, they're going to call him up. You sound a little more familiar with Loutos, who maybe is a guy that could be something. But Feyereisen realistically is just a name that they was recently designated for assignment or went on waivers, and now he's available.
Yeah, and his mom follows me on Twitter. But yeah, that question about Feyereisen from our buddy Dan from Florida, one of the specific questions he mentions, he says, and he's never been a long relief guy, right? And that's pretty much true, except this year he actually has 2 of his last 3 appearances in AAA for the D-backs were 2-inning appearances, 32 and 38 pitches. So he is a guy who he at least has some experience going 2 innings, which would be useful. Loutos has only had 1-inning appearances all year this year. He's pitched in 8 games and he's pitched 8 innings, and he's pitched pretty well. But he's one who he actually has 2 minor league option years left, and so he feels more like a long-term project. Feyereisen, like you said, I wouldn't be surprised if he gets DFA'd at some point when they do need that 40-man roster spot. Loutos feels to me like a guy who they see, with this tweak to his mechanics and this tweak to his arsenal and this tweak to his pitch selection, we think he can actually be a dude. And we've got 2 years to figure it out. So that's, we'll see what happens. But definitely these felt, when I first read about him today, they felt like just nothing moves. But then I realized, oh no, this is exactly what I was thinking about yesterday. These are 2 guys. I'm like pulling up my phone. I'm at the car dealership getting an oil change. I pull up my phone. How many minor league options? They both have options. This is what I was thinking of yesterday, and it makes a lot of sense when you think of it in that context.
Yeah, so I'm sure we'll hear at least one of their names in the next week or so, just for the simple fact that the Dodgers might need some arms at some point. So, but if this is the big question we always talk about, if the Dodgers were ever all healthy, what would happen with all these pitchers? We're going to talk about that, so make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers. I want to thank you for being an everydayer. If you are one, an everydayer is just someone that listens or watches every day. We appreciate those of you that already are everydayers. It's very easy to become one. You just listen or watch every day. We're in baseball season, so it's a lot easier to follow because most of the time we're talking about a game either you just watched or you just missed or you're catching up on, whatever it is. We're here for you Monday through Friday, Sunday through Thursday, depending what type of schedule you're on. But thanks for that. And remember, you can always go beyond the podcast. Come Locked On Dodgers Insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnDodgers. And as you guys know, our insiders get a little bit of priority in some of these not quite mailbag type episodes, but episodes on off days when we're trying to find something to talk about. And our insider Matt from Victoria, British Columbia, he talked about Tony Gonsolin having a great night, but then got into, okay, let's talk about Kershaw's healthy, Blake Snell's healthy, Tyler Gosnell's healthy, Shohei Ohtani's ready to go, and the rest of the guys that are currently in the rotation are also healthy. What then, Jeff? What then in this amazingly perfect world would the Dodgers do?
You know how much I would love for this hypothetical scenario to come true. It never does for these Dodgers, but I don't think it's crazy to think that, too many of these guys might be healthy at the same time, enough that there is a question because, the impetus for Matt's question was Tony Gonsolin deserves to be in this rotation, and yet it kind of feels like he would be a little bit the odd man out if we had all 8-9 guys healthy. And I think they'd, and then I guess the other thing is Tony Gonsolin also has minor league options. The fact that Gonsolin and Roki and Emmett Sheehan, they're the 3 of this group that have minor league options. They might, if everybody did get healthy at the same time, those guys might spend some time in the minors later in the season, or you might see them kind of okay, Tony Gonsolin, instead of having long reliever here, let's have Tony Gonsolin as our long reliever. But I think the Dodgers built this whole pitching staff with the concept of they're never all going to be healthy at the same time. And so it's almost like I tell my kids, don't worry about something until you actually know what you're worrying about, And so we don't even know which guys are going to be healthy. I absolutely do believe there will come a point this season when the Dodgers have too many healthy starting pitchers and somebody who deserves to be in the rotation will get bumped out. I just have no idea who will be healthy, who will get bumped, because it's impossible to guess right now,
Yeah. If you take them peak of their powers and healthy, Blake Snell and Yamamoto are the for sure two for me in terms of rotation and playoff rotation. Like those are the two guys that you want at the top, pitching game 1 and 2 of any series. Ohtani is a little bit of a wild card because even if he is healthy, we don't know how effective he's going to be yet. But if we go peek at the powers, yeah, Ohtani's probably in there and starting a game 3 or maybe even a game 4. And then, you got Roki and May and Gonsolin and Glasnow. And, if you want to throw Kasperius in the mix just because he's pitching well, that's when, it kind of would just depend who's playing better at the time, who's pitching better at the time. Have been a Glasnow guy since they traded for him. That faith in him to remain healthy has gone away. The faith in him being a really good pitcher hasn't gone away. And I think for me, that'd probably be the fourth guy, peak of their powers. But, that's without me seeing what Roki can be at his very, very, very best.
Yeah, for me right now, it's an easy 1A, 1B, and 1C if they were all healthy. Yamamoto, Snell, and Glasnow. Those are guys, if they were healthy at the same time, that's your top 3 starters in the postseason. And then, yeah, you do look at, like, I would be inclined right now, thinking of everybody else on the roster, I'd be inclined to go with Gonsolin. Just the poise, the different look, all those things. I don't think it's recency bias just based on yesterday, but like I said yesterday, he's been so good. Every time he's pitched in the big leagues when he was healthy, he's been outstanding. And like
not so much in October, but I won't hold that against him.
Yeah, that was, yeah, who knows? That's a tiny sample size. That's the main thing for me. Yeah, you have a bad game and it happens to be in October, and suddenly you can't pitch in October. A fourth starter in October. I mean, he started game 2 of the World Series in 2020. That's not what you want. But a fourth starter in the postseason, give me Tony Gonsolin. But you know what? By the end of the season, like you said, it might be Roki. It might be Dustin May. It might even be Clayton Kershaw, depending on what Kershaw shows when he comes back. It could be Emmett Sheehan. There's so many people it could be. It could be Jackson Ferris, or Bobby Miller. Yeah, I said it. No, I already said Bobby Miller is closing out the winning game of the World Series. Bobby Miller, October closer. I got to keep reminding myself.
Yeah. Again, this is a dream that may never be imagined in full, but it definitely could get to a point where they have more than 6 guys that are healthy, and then decisions will have to be made. That's why like every Dustin May start is interesting to me, because he has to be at the best of the best of his best to realistically have a shot to stay in the rotation if this part ever does happen. And he is a guy that doesn't have options, and the Dodgers aren't tied to beyond this year, and aren't necessarily tied to in like the way they are with Kershaw, where he's a team legend. They're not going to trade him. But Dustin May, if the Dodgers need a bat and they have currently 7 pitchers, and Dustin May could get you a bat, that could be something that happens.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that we don't think of the Dodgers as being sellers at the trade deadline, and they won't be sellers, but that doesn't mean they won't trade away major leaguers. We saw it in 2020 with Ross Stripling. They traded away a legitimate major league starting pitcher because another buyer needed a starting pitcher and the Dodgers didn't need him. And, maybe in October, they might've rather had Stripling. I don't know though. I think Stripling kind of was at that spot. And so you might see the same thing with Dustin May. I don't think anybody else falls into that boat. if Michael Grove hadn't got hurt, I think he would have been traded already, but Dustin May, especially if he can keep pitching pretty well and be like, okay, but the Dodgers looking ahead, we've got these guys coming back. We don't see any way that Dustin May's in our 4-man postseason rotation. And then he's a free agent. Let's get something for him.
Yeah, he could be the better pitching version of James Paxton.
Yeah. James Paxton. Man. Why do you got to say things like that,
Yeah, it's the better version of him.
Andrew Heaney pitched a good game the other day, and I almost for a second, I always get him and James Paxton mixed up, like lefties who came to the Dodgers and pitched poorly. But Heaney pitched a lot better than Paxton did. But
yeah. Paxton, he was what he was, and we don't have to see him anymore. That's a good thing. But Jeff, Dodgers start a series with the Braves this weekend, starting a string of 19 games in 20 days, which is fun for us. Maybe not as fun for players, just because there are going to be, half of that is on the road and they come home for a while. So you got anything else before we get out?
No, looking forward to hopefully a good series in Atlanta. Hopefully the offense, whatever kicked into gear against the Pirates and Marlins, hopefully it stays in gear in Atlanta.
Yeah, even though Chris Sale hasn't been Cy Young Chris Sale this year, the Dodgers aren't facing him. They are probably facing the Braves' best pitcher on Saturday, but they get their former draft pick Grant Holmes again, who they fared very well against the first time around in LA, and then they get Bryce Elder, who doesn't throw hard and shouldn't be that great, and the Dodgers can hopefully get to him. So we'll see what happens. We'll talk about it all on Sunday night. So thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day, last listen, whatever listen of the day. We appreciate you. Remember, you can go beyond the podcast, become a Locked On Dodgers insider by going to joinsubtext.com/Locked On Dodgers. After you're done listening to us, you can check out the all-new Locked On MLB Game Night on the Locked On MLB YouTube or wherever you get podcasts, part of the Locked On MLB. You'll see us on there sometimes. You'll see a lot of the other Locked On hosts giving their quick 1-minute updates on all the games going on. It's kind of like a Sports Center without the highlights type deal. So
or if you're old like me, it's the old highlight news on TBS. I'm Jerome Jurinovich, and this is TBS Sports.
Yeah, so. I'm not quite there yet, but you can also find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff's on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vincent91. You can DM us any questions or comments. You can also send those via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be here with us. When you get in your car, or if you're at home, text your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you on Sunday.